Hello, everyone. My name is Tessa Rickson. I'm a lecturer in scenography at the Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. And it's my privilege to kickstart this very first Ecoscenography Reading Group. So first of all, we want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where QT now stands, the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. QT acknowledges these places have always been places of teaching, learning, and research.
And hello, my name is Ian Garrett. I'm coming to you from Toronto, where I am director of the Center for Sustainable Practice in the Arts, one of the producing partners for the Climate Change Theatre Action, as well as a faculty member at York University, where I teach ecological design for performance. Here in Toronto, or Takaranto, this area has been taken care of by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis, and is now home to many Indigenous peoples. And I want to acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant agreement to peacefully share and care for the Great Lakes region. And I thank Tessa and Tanya for linking with us across these vast distances.
So it's our privilege here at QT to be able to host this very first global Ecoscenography Reading Group. So just a little bit of housekeeping before I throw over to our amazing host, Tanya Bear. There is the Q&A function that is active during the webinar at the moment, and we will be doing questions at the end. So if you do have questions, please put those into the Q&A section, and then we'll come to them after the proceedings of this morning or evening, wherever you might be in the world, are finished. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tessa, and hello everybody and welcome. My name's Tanya Bear and I'm the host of this very first Ecoscenography Reading Group session. And I'm delighted to have people joining us from all over the world and in situ here live from Brisbane, Australia. So thank you very much for making the time today to come and join us. So my name's Tanya Bear. I'm an ecological designer, a community artist, a researcher and an educator, and also the founder of the Ecoscenography platform. And over the next few months, we'll be running a few of these. And the Ecoscenography Reading Group is a new platform for theatre makers and friends who are interested in exploring new ways of ecological thinking. We're forefronting a number of articles, plays, books, texts that are interested in ecological ways of knowing, ecological ways of doing. So this month and over the next couple of months, we will be having specific texts that focus on this broader discussion. And in particular, we're working on the Climate Change Theatre Action plays. And Chantal's going to tell us a little bit more about the Climate Change Theatre Action project as part of this. And we're really lucky to feature 3 playwrights today from different parts of the world, all talking about climate change and the effects of climate change on our human species in different ways. And we've also got 3 different playwrights in the room as panellists who are also going to talk to us about the play. So this is very much a playwright special. It's all about honouring the playwright and honouring theatre stories and making sense of them and how we perform those stories. So before we get started, I want to thank the organisations that have made this possible. It's a huge, vast group of people that have brought this to the fore. First of all, the Prague Quadrennial of Performance Design and Space. We are part of the PQ Knowledge platform. So Ecoscenography is a knowledge partner as part of PQ. I also want to thank the Centre of Sustainable Practice in the Arts, and Ian Garrett is the head of that. The Arctic Cycles Climate Change Theatre Action Project, World Stage Design 2022, Griffith University, Australia, Queensland University of Technology, Australia, and York University in Canada. I also want to really thank my colleagues that have been working really hard behind the scenes to make this possible for you today. This is very much a testing ground. We've never done this before. We're a bit nervous about how all the tech's going to go, so fingers crossed we'll be okay. So Ian Garrett, who you've just met, Tessa Rickson, who did a fantastic acknowledgement of country and welcome from QT, and Alex Lord, who you'll be seeing more of next month. I also want to make a shout out to Monique Roy, who's been doing a lot of the curatorial work behind this and getting this event together, including all the organising and also the selection of the plays. And Josephine Reed, who has done this extraordinary stage design and piece of ecoscenography that you will see behind me. So thank you everybody for making this possible. And now it is with my great pleasure that I introduce our incredible panel to you. 3 incredible playwrights. First, we have Chantal Bilodeau, who is a Montreal-born, New York-based playwright and artistic director of the Arctic Cycle. Chantal is the co-founder of the Climate Change Theatre Action Initiative and has been instrumental in getting the theatre community to engage in climate action through live events, talks, publications, workshops across the globe. In 2019, she was named as one of 8 trailblazers who are changing the climate conversation by Audubon magazine. So thank you, Chantal, so much for joining us today. Next, we have Keith Barker, who is a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario. He's a playwright, actor, and director from Northwestern Ontario, and the current artistic director of Native Earth Performing Arts in Toronto. Keith has won multiple awards, including Adora Maver Moore Award, the Playwrights Guild's Carol Bolt Award for Best New Play. His audio play, Every Minute of Every Day, recently premiered as part of the Factory Theatre's You Can't Get There From Here podcast play series in spring 2021. Thank you, Keith, as well for joining us today from Canada. And finally, closer to home, here with me in the room, my colleague, Dr. Linda Hassall from Griffith University. Linda has 30 years of experience as a director, playwright, and dramaturg in professional theatre industry. Her artistic focus is on developing new work in Australian landscape performance, and her research investigates the impact of climate change on the Australian landscape and the corresponding effects on the Australian character. She's an award-winning playwright and has recently written a book linking her artistic and scholarly practice. And her forthcoming book is entitled Theatres of Dust, Climate Gothic Analysis in Contemporary Australian Drama and Performance Landscapes. So thank you, Linda, for joining us today in person. So Chantal, Keith, and Linda are going to help guide the discussion of these 3 outstanding plays and how these different texts explore environmental action on a local and global scale. I would also like to introduce our fabulous actors. So we are very lucky to have actors joining us here for the play reading. Aldrich Dugarte and Lucy Heathcote, both of whom are volunteering their time to read for us today. Lucy Heathcote is a Brisbane-based actor and writer who graduated from QUT's Bachelor of Fine Arts in 2020. And Aldrich Dugarte is a comedian and actor originally from Venezuela, who is currently based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And we are also lucky to have Keith join us as part of the readings. So let's talk about our plays. So we've included 3 plays for this month's session, and you've all hopefully had a read of these plays in preparation for today. And we've got Initiation by Angella Emurwon, Ranger by Yvette Nolan, and Consultation by Dylan Vandenberg. And we chose these plays as they address the central action of, the central theme of action and hope. And so we're really hoping for an uplifting start to this series. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce or invite Chantal to tell us a bit more about the Climate Change Theatre Action Project, including how it has evolved over the last few years. So Chantal, if you want to tell us a bit about it, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Tanya. It's really great to be here with everyone tonight. So Climate Change Theatre Action started in 2015 after a conversation between 4 colleagues And we felt like we needed more playwrights to write about climate and environmental issues and climate justice issues. And we were trying to figure out some kind of frame for that to happen. And the concept of a theater action already existed. And so we adapted it and we created climate change theater action. The way it works is we commission 50 playwrights from around the world to make sure that every continent is represented. And we ask them to write a short play about 5 minutes long about an aspect of climate based on a prompt. This year in 2021, the prompt is envisioning a global Green New Deal. So that's why I think, Tanya, you found some hope and action in the plays that you read. So we create this collection of 50 plays. Once we have all the plays in hand, we make them available to anyone who wants to organize an event within a certain time window that's in the fall. So again, this year, our big kickoff event was on this past Sunday, and the festival will run until mid-December, until December 18th. People can pick one or several plays to present an event. They can add more material if they want to by local artists. Sometimes there's music added or visual arts. Sometimes the plays are presented as part of conferences. And they can do events that are at any scale. So if for people who don't have much resources or no resources at all, they can sit together and read plays with their friends in their backyard, or it can go as big as being a fully mounted presentation in a theater. So it's meant to be very flexible. And as part of the presentation, we encourage people to think about an action that they can include that helps people either connect or get a little bit more engaged with climate. And those are also very open. People can come up with whatever they want to. Sometimes it's as simple as petitions or writing letters to representatives. Sometimes it's more involved, like planting trees. Some people have donated food to food banks. So any little thing that can be done that's a step beyond just experiencing the theatrical presentation. The festival has been done, this is our fourth time. It happens every other year. So 2015, 17, 19, and now this year. And as I mentioned, we just had our big kickoff event on Sunday. That happens in New York City because that's where I'm based. And what we did this year, when we started planning the event, we didn't know what was going to happen with the COVID restrictions. So we planned to present outside. And I'm grateful for that because I don't think I would have ever thought of doing that event outside if it hadn't been for the risk that if we were inside, we might not be able to go forward with the event. So we presented outside. It was in Central Park. What we did was a guided walk. Little groups left every half hour, and they were taken to little nooks in Central Park off the main paths where they could experience 4 of the plays that are part of the collection, one of which we are going to read tonight, which is Initiation. In addition to Initiation, we had a play by Marcus Youssef from Canada. We had a play by Elia Kassam from Kenya, and another one by Jessica Huang from the US. And then the last thing I wanted to say, and I think, Alex, you might be able to jump in, is that over the years, we've developed a design component, a very big design component that's part of CCTA that happens, and Alex can talk to about that more than I can.
Great. Thanks so much, Chantal. Alex, I don't know if you want to speak anything, you want to say anything about it now. We're going to learn a bit more about it next month. Is there anything you want to contribute? I think Alex is on mute, or it's not, the sound is not coming through. Oh no. Look, it's fine. Alex, what we'll do is we might wait till next month. That gives us an excuse to come back and hear all about it. Okay, great. So let's get started with the readings. We are actually reading the play that Chantal mentioned, Initiation, by Angella Emurwon. So we're going to get started with the first reading. This will be performed by Lucy, and Aldrich will read the stage directions. So actors, when you're ready.
A woman kneels hands deep in a mound of earth, rich, alive. 2 or 3 young shoots peep through at the edges of the mound. Dead leaves and stems peep through as she works the earth.
Well, don't be afraid. Come here to me. Come. Your limbs have grown strong, still. Yet, you've been tasked to find your footing in an in-between time. Past exploits and exploitations no longer serve a world brought to its knees. And the future, a fledgling wing on which the hopes of all are buoyed. Oh, come, heart of my heart. Come, put your hand on this earth. Let your fingers seep deep. Lower your head, listen, allow the pulsating silence to train your hearing. Breathe deep. Expand your chest and make room for all the work that must be yours. Behold the battleground and the spoils. Battle 1. It was not our portion that wrought this devastating decay. Not on us to bear the impossible burden and render the statistic 1 in 1. Inevitable. Not us who force-fed the poison that was to make us civilized. Now ailing are led back to a cure that once was all we knew. Battle 2. True, this earth is our home, all of us. Well, true, this battle is on us, all of us. Then let us fight together as peers. Do not our commanders drink at the same fountain of greed and corruption? Do not our commanders deserve the same sins with which to repent? Let us burn and build, and with it grow our capacity to fight as all have done. Let all our warrior garments weigh the same. But as battles were spoken and prides were enraged, the earth unpacked itself of all options. It shut down convenient exits and arguments, armed itself with wind and water, pestilence and plague, and tired of listening, took the future off the table. This is not a storyteller's song. No. Do not wait to hear the name of some hero, some legend, some icon. For indeed, you are the hero. And here we are still, in the midst of the journey. As recent as last night's dream, as fantastic as dreams can often be, we had no choice. We took a stand. Yes, it was not we that wrought this devastating decay, but, heart of my heart, it was we who held the key that would buy all the world more time. We, on this continent, with more recent remembrances and practices of a life and world shared, and with available global knowledge and technology that would enable us to rebuild differently, new and better systems, for better lives, justice, and equality for all. We remembered our own terrible mistakes. We did not need to prove our value by making more. It would not be less of an exploit to put aside hard-won advancements if less meant that we would gain more time for all of us. This earth, this beautiful planet, and all the life that lives here is a thing of utmost wonder. Here, heart of my heart, close your hand around this fist of dirt, dark, rich, sacred, brimming with hope, promising a future. I have called you here, heart of my heart, not to pass the work of keeping this earth alive to you, but to ask you to put your hands in the dirt and do the work of keeping the earth alive with me.
Thanks so much, Lucy and Aldrich. I really love the style of this piece. It feels like part poem, part play, part gentle feminist call to action. It is a piece of eco-poetry as much as it is a monologue. So I want to throw my first question to you, Chantal, which is, what were your first responses to this play? What were your initial thoughts? How did this world of the play open up to you?
Thanks, Tanya. I really like the poetic style of the play, and I think Angela does a wonderful job at pointing to a place of hope and emphasizing that we're in this together. There's a lot of work that, in general, a lot of work that put more emphasis on what's wrong with the climate, and not that we should ignore that, but sometimes it can be hard to figure out how to move forward if all we are faced with is the ways we are failing. And I think I felt like she was trying to take the blame away and just say, like, look, let's not blame each other and let's just work together. And I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, I was thinking about who she's talking to, and I imagine a child. That's who I think she's talking to, and perhaps her own child. But then I've come to think that she's also talking to us, right, as children in a way. There's something very nurturing about her call to action. It feels very warm, very feminine. So yeah, every time I read that play, I feel more things, and I see more in it. That there's so many layers in all of these plays. You could keep reading them forever and still find new things. Keith, this is a question to you. Do you think that the play stokes or alleviates our fears associated with the climate crisis? And perhaps even responding to this in terms of the way the playwright uses language and the sense of rhythm in the play as well.
Yeah, first, pleasure to see all of you. My name's Keith Barker. As I said before, I'm a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario. My maternal grandfather comes from Mattawa, which here in Ontario, Canada, but I was raised in Treaty 3 territory, so I'm really happy to be here. And with this piece, for me, there's a rhythm in which she speaks that is so, like, she's speaking facts in moments, and there's a call to action in this, but there's also just the rhythm of poetry, and I can just hear her sitting at her computer saying the words over and over again, saying them in a way that just things that are hard to say and things that are beautiful to say are all mixed in together. And I feel like I absorbed so much in what she had to say, just in the way she delivers it to us. And I do think there's a feminine voice in that is actually really quite powerful. That resilience and that understanding of that positive way forward is very clear in this piece for me. I also sense there's a real, and I mean, just from my own work in my own life, it's as an indigenous worldview I feel in this, the idea that we are all connected, that everything is connected to that thing and to us. And so feeling the heart, feeling the earth, feeling us, the holding on to those things is so present in how we are all connected together. That kind of it's very cyclical, but also comes back to us. She starts with us and comes back to us. And yeah, so I just think, I can imagine she spent many hours picking each word precisely, and it hits every moment. So it's really beautiful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking that the play is like a warm hug, isn't it? It just feels like she's hugging us and comforting us through her words, which is kind of amazing that words can make you feel like words can become a hug, you know, particularly in times of COVID and lockdowns. I know in Australia, we're experiencing down south quite extreme lockdowns. So I also want to acknowledge those of you from New South Wales and Victoria that have joined us today who are in lockdown. Okay, so we'll move on to the next text. This is the second play. Ranger by Yvette Nolan, again performed by Lucy and Aldrich is performing with us, and Keith is going to read the stage directions. Actors, when you're ready.
Ranger by Yvette Nolan. A border. A series of goodbyes. Partners parting. Children waving goodbye to parents. Good friends hugging, then letting go. They are not violent goodbyes, though there is sadness, wistfulness, pride, resignation.
Please, Brooke,
Please yourself, Niall.
please come with me.
I can't. I'm needed here.
I need you.
Then stay.
And do what?
Do what the rest of us are doing.
Park ranger.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it is, isn't it? Glorified. No. Not even glorified. Just a park ranger. Less than a park ranger. A gardener.
Not a gardener. If they only wanted gardeners, I would be shit out of luck. You know I'm all black thumbs.
You're gonna get bored
I don't think so.
babysitting a park.
You are so
So what?
condescending.
Brooke, you are a city creature. You love cities. New York, Vancouver, Florence. How are you going to survive in a Luddite society?
Just because we don't use fossil fuels does not mean we are a Luddite society.
No vehicles,
We have carts and wagons.
and you're afraid of horses?
Niall, I am staying. You are going. They're going to close the border soon. Is this how you want to say goodbye?
What about your mother? She's not getting any younger.
I'm doing this for my mother, for all my relations, so people can breathe again.
Why do they have to close it down permanently? Why can't we visit? Why can't you come out?
You know why. We need to give the land a chance to work. We need to give the lungs a chance to grow. We can't have traffic moving through. Everyone who is staying is committed to caring for the park for 4 years. In 4 years, if this works, then maybe we can open it up to the public and people can come and visit and hike or ride into the park and see what we have created.
An overgrown bush.
And by then, the animals will be back. By then, the water will be clean.
You hope.
I do hope. It is the only reason I signed on to be a glorified park ranger. No, not the only reason. But this is my land. This is where I grew up. I could have moved east with the rest of you, but to never see this land again.
You are risking your life, Brooke. You don't know how this experiment will turn out. No power.
Clean power.
What happens when people get sick, get injured, get attacked by the bear who suddenly does not have to contend with traffic or hunters?
We have doctors, Niall. We have biologists. We have all the skills we need.
You did not exactly train for this.
My skills are transferable. I was getting bored with money and paper anyway. I'm an organizer. What bigger challenge than to organize 1 million people in 5 million square kilometers of land? It's a monumental task.
It's a fool's errand.
And that is why you're going, Niall, to the crowded, choking city. And I'm staying to be part of creating a global park.
Brooke.
You gotta go, Niall. They're plowing the roads in after you go. You gotta go now.
A park ranger appears. Sir, I will escort you to your vehicle now.
I'm going. Can I just...
The ranger steps back, but not away. Brooke goes to hug Neil. They hug, then part. The ranger moves in to herd Neil away. Brooke waves and walks away and does not look back.
Great. Thank you so much, Lucy, Aldrich, and Keith. So very different play to the first one, and that's the beauty of all these three plays. They're so different. And I really love the tension that this piece creates between two characters in such a short amount of time. It feels like a heightened version of the kinds of conversation, I suppose, that we might be having more of in the future. So my next question is to Linda. How does the playwright guide the tensions between the characters and their viewpoints, and how do you think this is reflected in our own world today?
Thank you, Tanya. My name is Linda Hassall. It's nice to be here. I'm from Central Queensland. I grew up in a very hot, dry, dusty landscape that is also recognised for the mining industry. And I think I carry that with me into the work I do. So just wanted to situate myself in this discussion. I think the tension in the play is really evident right from the word go. I mean, just the title, separation makes us, the idea of separation makes us anxious. There's a feel to that word that drives attention. It's also in the first stage direction, a border. A border is a place where you either choose to cross, move on, move through, or it's a choice you make to stay. And so the circumstance itself sets up a specific tension for me. It also is in the subtext that we sort of feel that this might be the last park, the last green space, and these may be the last humans. So that sets attention immediately. This idea of protecting that almost sacred space has a time frame. You know, we've got 4 years. I think the playwright suggests that we can change things. We can make the choice to change things. I think it's a sophisticated play, Tanya, because it sort of utilizes an almost Pinteresque tone in its dialogue. This seemingly ordinary conversation between two people generates this sort of extraordinary subtext that is just weighted with meaning. I think the tension that the play explores is certainly evident in contemporary society. We all know we've moved over the edge. We're past the tipping point. You know, the escalation of natural disasters, habitat destruction, extinction, rising sea levels, climate change, global warming. We all know about it, but for a lot of people, it's still a very abstract concept. It's something that sort of we're aware of, but it's happening out there to other people somewhere else until it actually happens to us. I think it's an important play. It gets the heart or the question of what's the legacy we're going to leave to future generations, and asks us to think about what we're ready to give up or forsake. Thank you.
Great. So much in that detailed response to the question. Thanks so much, Linda. I think it's really interesting about also the, you know, how we're talking about the actual dialogue and then the subtext, you know, what is in between the dialogue. And when I imagine, and I'm not a playwright myself, but I imagine, and certainly as a designer and as a performance maker, you know, the stage, what the playwright puts in the stage directions and also the naming of the play has even more importance in a 5-minute piece. So the next question goes to Chantal. The playwright does an amazing job of transporting us to the world of the play in very little time. As a playwright, how do you create the unique worlds of your stories, and where do you go for inspiration?
To answer your question very literally, I go to the Arctic for inspiration because I'm writing a series of plays that have to do to the Arctic, with the Arctic. But in general, I think, I mean, Yvette does this very well in her play. I think we're standing on a line, let's say, that's reality, and that's a very thin line, the reality as we understand it. And all you have to do is take a step to the right or take a step to the left, and then suddenly you can enhance that reality. You can shift it a little bit to allow us to see things differently. So I think it's really about points of view. You take a slightly different point of view and suddenly you have a very different world. And I think inspiration can come from any number of places. I often cannot pinpoint where I get my inspiration from. Suddenly there's an idea and it just happened to stick. I have a lot of ideas and they come and go. And then once there's one that sticks, I know like, oh, this is a good one to pursue. And sometimes I think playwrights write from different, they have different points of entry. Some playwrights start with characters and the characters dictate everything else. I tend to come from a sense of place or even an idea, and then I figure out who do I need to make this idea something that is tangible as opposed to something that's just intellectual.
Great. Thank you so much, Chantal and Linda, for those questions. And remembering that we can talk more about all three plays at the end. So we want to keep moving through with the play readings. So this is our final piece, Consultation. Our final reading by Dylan Vandenberg, and it's performed again by Lucian Key and Aldrich reading the narration. So actors, when you're ready.
Consultation by Dylan Vandenberg. Characters. A. White person, definitely in a suit. B. First Nations person, definitely not in a suit. Setting. A meeting room. Imagine there's a fire raging out of one window and the other is straining under the weight of a steadily rising body of water. Note. The terms blackfella and mob are often used by Australia's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to refer to themselves. The term country is in reference to a blackfella's ancestral land. B can be played by anyone of a First Nations background, and these terms can be adjusted as required. A and B sit at a table. There's an uneasy silence.
Is there anything you'd like to say?
That I'd like to say?
Yes. Anything you want to say?
I can say myself, straight to the people, wearing suits, whoever they are.
Yes, of course, you can. You can say it yourself in time. But now, it's not...
The time.
That's right.
And so this is...
Consultation. A process of consultation with the original peoples.
Blackfellas?
Yes, that's it. With you. And this is our consultation room, our nicest room. This is a necessary and important step.
In your process?
Yes. And I'll take my findings, your words and ideas, and I'll take it all back. And then we'll have a deal.
Right. Where are you from?
That doesn't matter. So, what do you want to pass on? How would you like to see, what would you like to do to fix it all?
A gestures to the window.
Preferably in a few dot points.
I'd say that it is really...
I don't have a pen.
A rummages for a pen.
All right. I'm ready. You were saying what you would say?
Yeah. So I'd say this is all, it's all, you're late, quite late. Because mob like us, we've been here forever trying to talk, trying to add our 2 bobs worth. Stories, knowledge. We got stories stamped on our skin, stretching up our arms and down our backs. Everything you need to know is there, like a map of this place just waiting to be read. The answers just setting up in our brains, just waiting to come out. But the truth's like a whisper, ain't it? Take more than me to cure the world's deafness, that's what I know. But I'd say these things. Your plan, it's
The biggest. It's global. It's major. It's big.
in all that bigness, don't forget the places, the smallness. Every place has its own story. The ancestors said the rivers have their own songs. You got to dig your feet into the dirt and listen to each of them. And I'd say it's bigger than the sun getting hotter and the salt water getting higher, higher, higher. Because of you, we keep dying. The rivers run with blackfella blood, and the trees are home to our spirits. We watch what you do, and we're here. But we get nothing back. We keep trying, clinging on to something we can't see, a hope or a spool or a dream which might lead us back to the way things used to be. And we want to share what we know about how to stop the bush from burning up, about how to talk to country and hear it murmur right back. But you shoot us down and you lock us up and you give us looks when you see us, and you don't know, won't ever know what we know. And there ain't nothing more confining than the prison you don't know you're in. And that's it.
Well, that's a lot, but thank you for your contribution. I was hoping you would sign this.
Blackout. The end.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lucy, Eldrick and Keith. Actually, I just want to give a round of applause to all our performers right now. If you're at home, give them a clap, because that's amazing. And I also just want to say that these actors have never before today performed together. They are also performing across wide distances with obviously with Zoom technology. And it's incredible, really, that this can happen without ever getting on a plane and with ever meeting each other, that you can find a dialogue together like this. So amazing. So thank you so much for your contributions today. I think this is a very powerful play. I feel a heaviness with this play, particularly being based here in Australia and living here in Australia. The heaviness of this play is really felt for me. I think it's interesting that there was quite a lot of silence between the dialogue, potentially also because of the Zoom technology, but they think that the rhythm of the piece is meant to have these silences that create this sense of tension between the characters. So the first question I want to direct to Keith In the notes of the play, the playwright Dylan Vandenberg suggests that Actor B can be played by anyone of a First Nations background. And he also says the terms blackfella, mob, and country, which are very specific Aboriginal Australian terms, can be adjusted as required. And I find this a very captivating choice. This is obviously a big part of the stage directions of how the playwright wants this piece to be read. So Keith, how did it feel to read Actor B as a First Nations Canadian actor? Did you connect with the Australian Indigenous story? For example, the tensions between Indigenous and non-Indigenous perspectives? And do you think that the choice to have any First Nations actor play Actor B is effective?
That's a great question. For those of you who don't know, I'm artistic director at Native Earth Performing Arts, which is Canada's oldest professional Indigenous theatre company in Canada. And we've done a lot of this work with partners across the ocean. So we've worked with Muglin Theatre, we've worked with Tawada in Tawada, and in terms of we did an exchange a couple of years ago where it was Your Work, Our People, and we had an Australian Indigenous story, and then we had a Canadian First Nations artist read, and so I think there's always discoveries in that. I recognizing, I am white passing. And so I recognize that privilege, but also understand what that means sometimes to people, but also understanding that I'm connected in a way of understanding and knowing certain stories and seeing the parallels of different stories between, in Canada, we have the First Nations, Métis and Inuit peoples, and all, from coast to coast to coast have very, very different relationships to government like this story. But lots of these stories that I read and lots of the artists that we engage with, we all find the parallels in the stories we're telling together. This one about that extractive nature of government, that is where I'm finding, working in the arts right now, there are lots of theater companies that are discovering Indigenous theater around the world right now. Suddenly, in the last 5 years, there's more funding for it. There's, especially in Canada. And that shift has been, so it's navigating those waters of someone showing up saying, hi, we're doing this big project and we'd love to get your input on it. And then we'll go away and make this big project and come back. Like, you can frame it government, you can frame it in the arts, you can frame it in sports, you can, and so that those themes are present right now. I mean, those themes are present in a conversation I had 2 days ago. And have artists reaching out to me and saying, so is this a real partnership? Is this something different? And so those relationships have been going on for a very, very long time. And there's a lot of consultation. I think there are lots of governments come up and start consulting and then take it away and then they never do anything. And I think that's the thing where we all connect and understand each other. And I've been part of the Global First Nations Exchange, and we met in Australia, we met in New York, and we met in Ottawa in the last 4 years. We've met, and the rooms and the stories are all very, very similar. And I've had artists. My play was read at Muglin's festival a couple of years ago, and I had a Maori artist and an Aboriginal from Australia, from Sydney, all a Torres Strait artist, read my play, a Canadian play with references to hockey and stuff like that. And so we had lots of conversation, and it just brings and pops different things. The language, the rhythms are different. And I think as for playwrights, it's always, I love hearing my words spoke from someone from a different country or from somewhere else, because they speak it differently, they think it differently, they don't understand necessarily the context, but they understand the characters. And so I think that's always the exciting part.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith. That was such a great response as well, really detailed, and also really great to hear about your own work and your own collaborations. And this notion of a consultation, I've heard a lot from my First Nations colleagues. Is it a consultation or is it a partnership? Is it a true partnership or is it just a consultation? And I think the word consultation as the title is one that's interesting, because I feel like consultation is generally considered to be often something more superficial. And what I think we're calling for this play as well is consultation isn't enough, right? It's too little too late is what the feeling of the piece is. And partnerships need to be formed, you know, a lot sooner. And that is actually reciprocal on both sides.
Yeah, that extractive nature
exactly
of those things, like there's something wrong here, how do we fix it? We go to you and get your answer and we're going to pull it out. And it's like, it's not a collaborative, like in Canada right now with all the forest fires, they're looking at indigenous ways in which they worked with forest fires to do it in a safe way so that we don't have these forest fires that just go. And I know Australia has had that same thing where it just goes, there's these wildfires that go on and on and on. But there was actually a time when indigenous people actually cared for the land and burned those forests in a way that made them safe again. So to me, it's like there's that extractive nature is always, that's when it doesn't feel like a partnership.
Yeah, that's
anymore.
Exactly. And it's interesting that you're talking about fire practices because it sounds so similar to what's happening here in Australia as well. I think Linda and I were just talking before about the last line about now can you sign this, is the moment that we all just, both of us kind of shuddered. It's amazing how just a few words can really, just say so much. So in that note, I want to move to Linda. Thanks so much, Keith. And we can continue this conversation going because I feel like it's a big one. Linda, in the setting description of the playwright suggests a meeting room with a fire raging out of one window and another window that is straining under the weight of a steadily rising body of water. This is what is written by the playwright. How do you think this setting description helps support the tensions of the play? And what do you think is the role of the landscape in the text?
Thanks, Tanya. I think this is a really significant play, and like yourself, I find it quite weighty. It's almost brutal in its honesty in some ways. I think the setting is actually reflective of the absurdity of these consultation processes. I mean, as we know in this country, we've had First Nation elders offering the government strategies for land management and land care practices, but nothing is ever applied. You know, it's a consultation process, which is, you know, extending on what Keith said before. It seems like this idea of land management in a time of exacerbated climate change in this country, where, you know, very recently we've had extended bushfires that go for 3 to 5 months in one part of the country and then floods in another part of the country. It's crazy, and I think that's reflected in the setting of the play. Any sort of process of land management is tied up in sort of white tape administration practices. So I think that the whole setting of the play informs the absurdity of this almost tokenistic conversation that the play explores. I think the landscape in the text, Tanya, is more a psychological landscape than an actual one. Again, it seems to me to be a border space where A and B sort of come together but don't actually meet anywhere. It's nothing is agreed upon, or realistically nothing is actually said that's going to evoke change from one perspective. It's a place of philosophical and experiential opposition. And that's defined specifically by that last line in the play. I think it's really important that and really effective how the playwright distinguishes this idea of the difference between country and landscape. I mean, landscape is what white people like myself actually talk about, and it's sort of a place-based geography, whereas for Indigenous people in this country, they talk about country and they actually talk to country. And that's really evident. I think it's one of the most beautiful lines I've ever heard. We've got stories stamped on our skin, stretching up our arms and down our backs. Indigenous peoples of this country actually map. They are maps within the country. So yeah, I think it's a really powerful play. Thank you.
Great. Great. Thank you so much, Linda. My last question goes to Chantal. In Australia and Canada especially, we are waking up to the value of Indigenous ways of knowing. Can you tell us some of the ways that we can respectively acknowledge and forefront Indigenous perspectives in our own creative work?
Hi, Tanya. I'm just waiting. I can't turn on my video. I'm just waiting for somebody to do it. Thank you. Can you please repeat your question?
Sure. No worries. In Australia and Canada especially, we're waking up to the value of Indigenous ways of knowing. Can you tell us some of the ways that we can respectfully acknowledge and forefront Indigenous perspectives in our own creative work?
Yeah, well, one thing we can do is get out of the way and make room for Indigenous voices, make space for Indigenous artists. And I think, as Keith was describing so well, being aware of whether we're consulting or we're creating true partnerships. My own relationship to working with Indigenous artists has been through climate change theater action, trying to make sure that they were represented in the collection of stories that we put forward, because I think their perspective and their voice is really important. And I have also encountered and talked with Indigenous communities as part of my own research for my cycle of Arctic plays, and try to include their voices in my own stories to make sure, because especially in the Arctic, because the Indigenous populations are so present and have been there for so long, I don't think you can tell a story about the Arctic in any country and not have those Indigenous voices be part of it. But yes, in general, I think just getting out of the way, giving them room to say what they need to say, and being humble enough to learn what sometimes we don't even know we have to learn.
Great. Thanks so much, Chantal. Yeah, that's great. All of these responses are so interesting, and I think we could talk about this for quite a while. So now we're really getting to that point of opening up to the rest of you that are coming in, watching us live, and see if you have any questions for our panel, whether you want to direct them specifically to a particular panel member, or whether you want to just, send it out there, and we can ask which panel member wants to answer the question. So I think we actually have a question already, so we might go straight to that one. So just got my laptop here. With Canada's first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation next week, I think artists like playwrights play such an important role in exposing the truth before we can get to reconciliation. I'd welcome any recommendations. And Keith, I think you've put your hand up to answer this question, which is great.
Yeah. There's a wonderful book of plays called the Residential School Plays. It's called The Indian Act. Can people see that? I think that weird blurry thing in my video, I will just take away. None. There it is. It's called Indian Act. It's Residential School Plays. It's edited by Donna Michelle St. Bernard, and it's part of the Playwrights Canada Press. And there are plays around residential schools, and it's not just about residential schools. As Yvette Nolan, who wrote the Ranger one this evening, has a piece in here about her mother, who was a survivor. And after her mother passed away, the government sent her a $10,000 check. And so she wrote a play about what she did with that $10,000 check, and it's actually really quite moving. It's one of my favorite pieces in this. There's a piece called Bunk Number 7 by a survivor named Larry Gunno, and it's about these boys that are in residential school, and you realize they're just boys. They're just kids trying to survive in a school. And his play was actually put in as evidence in the Truth and Reconciliation. That was his evidence put forward, was this play. The other one I would say is to take a look at Cafe Daughter by Ken Williams, which is a short one-person play, and it talks about the what people had to endure. And it's actually a senator in Canada who just retired named Lillian Dick, and it's her story. She's half Chinese and half Cree, and back in the 1950s, it was illegal for white women to work in Chinese cafes, and there are many cafes all around the provinces. And so lots of Indigenous women started working at the cafe because they could work there. And then there's lots of marriages, Chinese, Cree, Ojibwe, lots of interracial marriages. And Lillian Dick, who was a senator in Canada, just retired last year. She's done a lot of work for murder and missing Indigenous women. She's a fantastic lady. This is her story that Ken wrote about, and it's fascinating, and just kind of shows you what kind of the things that were happening back then, and kind of her experience to get herself through, and then the residential school plays. And then I have a bunch of other ones I can put forward too, if anybody has any other recommendations they want.
I had a follow-up question, Keith.
Sure.
Based off of your recommendation, was Bunk Number 7, was that read, or there was a performance of it at Native Earth at the last CCTA,
Yep.
Right? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
I was remembering
Yep.
that correctly. Yeah.
The other thing I would just say is that just in Canada right now, a book just came out by Jesse Wente, and it's called Unreconciled. And it's not a play, but it's a book. And Jesse used to be actually the president of Native Earth Performing Arts. He's now the president of our board, and he's now the president of the board of the Canada Council for the Arts, our federal funder. And so he's quite a significant voice, and he started the Indigenous Screen Office here in Toronto, which supports Indigenous filmmakers. And he's doing all this heavy lifting and all this work, but he just wrote a book and it's just come out. And if you can hear him it's on our public radio, CBC. If anybody wants to just listen to someone really speak from a place that is it's very moving. Jesse is very, very articulate, very funny, very warm, charismatic. It is worth any amount of time you get to hear him speak. He's truly amazing.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that question, Keith, but also for recommending some more readings, because this is a reading group. So it's perfect. And certainly, something that we can keep discussing is what books to read, what texts to read. And I suppose as a reading group, we can also expand that to things like podcasts and you mentioned radio and things like that. So that's certainly, if we think about the reading group as maybe also a listening group. But yeah, that's great. And Keith, I might get those names off you so that we can share them widely, because we'll be thinking about what we want to continue to read moving forward with this initiative. So that's really great. Do we have another question from the panel? So if you do want to post something, now is the time. Maybe while we're waiting for somebody to ask a question, or you can also make a comment as well. If you want, you can also make a comment, that's fine. Hey, I think we've got someone in the live audience. That's exciting.
It's been so long since I've seen someone run a mic.
Hello, my name is Meg. I do technical production at QT with Tessa, and I study with Monique. My question is something for theatre makers, so maybe it's for Tanya. How do you get people involved in this sort of thing who wouldn't usually be involved? I find that theatre that has a very strong message, or that tends to be political, ends up attracting an audience that already believes in that particular message. How would you suggest going about expanding your viewership?
Love it. I love the student full-on question. Awesome. Oh gosh, okay, where to start with that question? I suppose personally with a lot of my work, I've taken it out of the theatre, literally into urban spaces, into public spaces, and I often have deliberately not called it anything like climate change theatre or I've been careful of what I call it, right? Because my work is on purpose a little bit subversive. And this is because my personality is naturally very non-confrontational. Like I have I'm sort of shy away from confrontation. And this also speaks to the way that I'm an activist as well. So it's a kind of a tricky one, right? To hold kind of that activist spirit and at the same time be non-confrontational. So I'm always working in these subversive tactics to get people interested in sustainability or ecological issues, or just loving being outdoors in nature and loving plants, So I'm very deliberate in that my work is trying to be accessible to everyone, to all walks of life, to all political stances. And I try to bring out the fun factor. Like it's all about having fun. It's all about connecting to nature or living systems. It's about getting excited about native plants and talking about why they're so awesome, not only because they look good and, and they are beautiful to have in your home, but also because they have biodiversity benefits. And I do like cheeky things like engage people in things like botanical crafting. And I get a lot of people that are interested in the design aspect or the kind of aesthetics of it. And then I kind of feed in some biodiversity, eco kind of, knowledge into that. So yeah, I think that's been, it's sort of almost been, it's something I've come to analyze. I've been have a critique of myself and my own practice. And as an academic, reflecting on my own practice, I've realized it's my own personality coming through. And I think ultimately when it comes down to that question, what the answer to that question is, whether you do it outside or in theatres, is it's got to be fun. It has to be beautiful and fun and engaging, right? So I think there's this perception that eco theatre is like it's like Hessian, people dressed in Hessian sacks, it's, I don't know, it's perhaps a bit preachy. So we've got to break down those stereotypes, and the best way to do that is to showcase and forefront a diversity of work, right? So that we know that there is no one aesthetic for eco theatre and eco design. And I think that's been a really big part of my work in not only the work that I do, but forefronting other designers and other theatre makers that do such a diversity of work, and to show that it can be beautiful and evocative and grand and small and intimate at the same time. And it can use incredible technologies, but it can also be very simple and, non-tech as well. So that's probably my mission statement in terms of the kind of work I do. And my book, which is coming out later this year on ecoscenography, is deliberately showcasing as much diversity as I possibly can. And I realize it's still not enough, but it's a starting point. I think I also want to pass this question and maybe expand on it a bit further, because I want to pass it over to Linda, who's also a theatre maker at Griffith Uni. So
I think it's a big question, and we could sit here and talk about it or debate it all day. I agree with everything Tanya said. I don't think we want to be Brecht here. I don't think we're sort of, trying to create this sort of didactic, operatic, message or theatre for education. I think that's what you're not talking about TIE. You're talking about the theatre that we make. Two things, I think. It's about what sort of theatre, in inverted commas, we want to make, and who are our audiences. If we want to make theatre for theatre audiences, that's a specific type of theatre. if we want to make theatre for diverse audiences, we need to think about more who are we collaborating with for a start? Is it other theatre makers, or are we bringing in environmentalists, scholars, all sorts of, you know, interdisciplinary people that create theatrical events, perhaps, rather than theatre. Then we have our eco playwrights. I mean, Stephen Carlton, I'm not sure if he's in the audience, but he's an extraordinary playwright who makes extraordinary theatre in theatre spaces, but he does it in such his eco work, especially his recent work, he does it in such a way that it doesn't just appeal to theatre audiences. It appeals to a broad and diverse range of the population who may never have been to the theatre. And his latest work has just premiered in Darwin. Do you know what I mean? So you think about who you're making theatre for, who you're making it with, I think, and how you're going to make it. It doesn't necessarily have to have a climate change message, but the world that the work is in is a climate affected world, which people then absorb. So, you know, there's all sorts of ways I think we can think about it. I think, you know, as a theatre, did you say you're doing theatre technology? Yeah, you've got a great future ahead of you. No, realistically, you have like sustainable production processes. I think, you know, we are historically, you know, wastage in theatre. So, you know, you are the next generation that's going to come through and go, okay, we're not going to waste anymore. We're going to be energy efficient. We're going to reuse, recycle, redo, remake, reimagine, all those things. I think, you know, I leave it up to you.
Great. It was just one question. Look where it's got us. Oh my God.
Tanya, may I add to that?
Yes,
So I wanted to add a provocation to something that Linda just said. This may have been part of the intention there, but because the environment is inescapable, like literally we cannot leave the environment. We have to live within it, and at this point we live in an age of climate change. That like flipping it around, and how do you start to make theater about climate change? All theater hypothetically at this point is about climate change. It's just whether or not we've actually actively engaged the topic or not, because that is the context in which it is created. And that's inescapable. So there's turning it around to also how do you lean into, and which areas are you leaning into, whether that's production or dramaturgically, etc., of how you're actually expressing that fact of its existence in this moment, because that's the world that we live in.
Yeah, great. Do we have any other questions from the live audience or from the online audience? Nothing's popping up at the moment. I have so many questions. Where to start? We've been talking a bit about, you know, I suppose climate change, theatre action is about writing a climate change play, essentially. How difficult is it to write one? I would imagine it's quite difficult. What are the kinds of things you have to think about if you're writing a play on this topic? The playwright specific question. So is there anyone from the panel that wants to talk about this? Is the question too hard? Chantal?
No, I can say something if you want. Yeah.
Wait for it.
And Chantal, you jump in too. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like we had said, like every playwright enters, I think Chantal said this, every playwright enters with there's a different in. Sometimes it's a character that speaks to you, and sometimes it's the topic that really kind of ignites you to go further. And for me, I think it's just I feel so strongly about climate change and really feel, you know, it keeps me up at night. And so it's actually a very easy topic to talk about. And for me, it was like, how do we do this in a way that's fun? How do I do it in a way that is compelling and interesting, and that tells a story that people aren't necessarily, it's not the, I don't want to keep telling the same stories or something that isn't interesting. I was like, how do I do my own little twist on something? Like, how do I find my in with it? And I think that's where I had fun. That's where I really, in writing one, is like, it's also like, it's been a hard 18 months. Like, I feel for everyone in Australia right now on a heavy lockdown. Like, I'm in Ontario, and we had, at one point, had the longest lockdown in all the world. Like, we had gone the longest in a lockdown for like over a year. And so I feel that pain. And so writing was really a difficult thing. But a 5-minute play is actually really quite fun, because it's not, you're not thinking the larger sense of it. You got 5 minutes, and that character can speak to you very quickly, and then you get to just play with it at that point. And so you can write a bunch of little 5-minute plays and choose which one you like better. And the one I chose for climate change was great. Like, I really loved that 5-minute, like, being given the parameters of that, and then to want to speak about what I wanted to speak about. I really, yeah, took a long time to do, but I loved every minute of it. So
It's also, if I can jump in, thank you, Keith. I think there's a bit of a mythology that climate change is hard to write about. Like, why is that? People have written about war, people have written about illnesses, people write about love. I mean, people write about all kinds of things, but for some reason, for years, theaters have been saying like, oh, no, we can't do a play about climate change. That's too big, that's too hard, that's too... I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think there's been some kind of barrier that we had to plow through. But I mean, the plays we read tonight are very intimate. They're about relationships. They're about relationships against a bigger background. And that's what playwrights do. So I guess I'm pushing back on this idea that climate change is hard to write about, because we're living it. It's part of every aspect of our lives by now. It should be, I mean, it should be second nature.
Jump in.
Just to extend on what Chantal said, thank you, Chantal and Keith. It's not necessarily always about the big things either. Do you know what I mean? It can be about something really, really small. Like, for example, 2 penguins fighting over one piece of ice that's drifting away. Like, that's about climate change. But it's a small part of it. How you respond. It doesn't have to be the big picture stuff. It can be that sort of stuff that affects you. What are you going to miss? What do you already miss? Those are the sort of things, I think, that make the plays we just read really, really impacting and moving. So it's not necessarily about the huge things. It can be those little things that matter to us. And once again, they're ordinary things and we're ordinary people, but in speaking about them, we make them extraordinary. So I think that's interesting.
It's beautiful, beautiful words. Yes. Do we have another question? We have time for one more question. Gosh, I suppose I want to put it back to the panelists to... No, actually, maybe I'll ask Lucy and Aldrich. What was it like to read the plays? Lucy, I think, is turning her mic on so she can answer.
I'm terrified that it's always on, so I'm a bit paranoid. But they're such beautiful pieces, and I found anyway that I didn't truly understand the weight of them until we did the reading. And I guess it sort of made me realize as well that particularly the last piece, but I guess maybe all of them, they were sort of quite messy at times. And I guess I was sort of thinking how it's sort of similar to our relationship with the environment, which is a bit messy and a bit awkward and yeah, so it was sort of really interesting to have that, and all very different pieces as well. So it was a delight. I loved it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Aldrich, do you want to say something as well as the other actor?
Sure, yes. I feel similarly. As I was reading the piece and preparing, I didn't get the full breadth or scope of the pieces until I was able to perform them. I think something that resonated with me was how in the background, but it's also the foreground, is this impending climate change. The fact that, as was mentioned in the second piece, there's subtext of these are potentially the last humans on Earth, or this is potentially the last green space. In the third piece, there's the aspect of the room getting inundated and burning at the same time. Yet most of the pieces like spoke of the mundane, of just like a natural conversation that you would have. And I thought that contrast was really interesting, and it was highlighted especially through the actual reading of the text with other people.
Great, thank you. And Keith, do you want to say something from the perspective of an actor?
Yeah, I mean, I think the power of silence is uncomfortable. I think people just in general are always uncomfortable in silence. And as actors, we always want to jump in. There's so many directors will like take the breath or take a moment, let it sit, find the thought, all those things. Those are such powerful moments when, and if anyone's ever been in a room with an elder, we all sit in lots of silence and they're totally comfortable in taking the time to say what they need to say. And it's really quite refreshing because so many people don't. Everyone's go, got to get here, got to do this, got to do one. You're within a, we have an elder that opens our festival every year, and every year she reminds me to slow down. She grabs me by the arm and is like, hey. And so I was channeling her in that last, I was like, really take a breath, because she would really think about what she wanted to say to a consultant and what was important, and and because words matter. So yeah, that was it.
Great. Words matter is a great final line. Do we have another Q&A? Yes, hang on, I'll just go and have a look. So this comes from Cathal. I think there's something very powerful about experiencing work that addresses the environment in an outdoor setting. With the Central Park event, the audience really responded to being outdoors and rediscovering a park that many of them knew well. So I think that's a comment more than a question, perhaps. But thank you so much, Cathal, for that. Oh, that's the answer. Oh, I don't know what's happening. So I think we are actually at the end point now. So thank you everybody for joining us today for our first ever live Ecoscenography Reading Group event. I want to thank everybody for being part of this, the panelists, the actors, everybody that has worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this happen. This has in many ways been a bit of an experiment on a technical level. We've never done this before. So I'm hoping that everything went fairly smoothly, and will certainly be better informed for next time as well. So just letting you know that next reading group will be happening in October. We'll be sending out information about that. We'll have a new set of panelists as well, and a new set of plays to look forward to. And you're welcome to also email us if you have any comments or questions, or any feedback about this event. How we can make it better would be really appreciated as well, since this is all a learning curve for us. So I just want to give a round of applause to everybody for being part of this. Thank you so much. And we'll hopefully see you in October. See ya. Bye.